on this program last week. Then a few days later, he went to the UN and said a humanitarian pause must be considered. Then the U.S. at the UN voted against a humanitarian truce. So what exactly is the Biden administration calling for here? Because everyone from the Pope to the World Health Organization to the UN is saying just stop the violence for a period of time at least.
Well, what a lot of people are calling for is just a stop to Israeli military action against terrorists, period. Just stop. No more. Israel cannot go after terrorists who conducted this largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust and who continue to fire rockets and continue to attack Israel. We have taken the position that Israel has a right to defend itself against terrorist attacks. That is different from what Secretary Blinken spoke about, which was a humanitarian pause. A pause in the fighting, for example, so that there's a period of time where there can be safe passage of hostages.
So just hours.
President Biden and his whole team are working extremely hard to get those hostages out. We will continue to do that. I won't put a time frame on it, but I will say that given the number of hostages, it would be more than just hours if we were able to secure their release, and we are actively working to secure their release. And similarly, when Secretary Blinken said that any pause in fighting benefits Hamas, that's a reality. There are a lot of complicated realities in this. A humanitarian pause would be a good thing to get hostages out, but you can bet that Hamas will try to use that time to their advantage as well. These are the things that Israel is trying to grapple with.
So to that point, Benny Gantz, who is part of the Netanyahu war cabinet, said, "We will listen to our friends, but we will act in accordance with what is right for us." Is there any daylight, Jake, between the U.S. and the Netanyahu government right now?
We have conversations like friends do on the hard questions that I talked about before, on issues associated with humanitarian aid, on distinguishing between terrorists and innocent civilians, on how Israel's thinking through its military operation. Those conversations happen multiple times a day. They happen between the president and the prime minister. They happen by the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, myself, other senior members of our administration. We talk candidly. We talk directly. We share our views in an unvarnished way, and we will continue to do that. But sitting here in public, I will just say that the United States is going to make its principles and propositions absolutely clear, including the sanctity of innocent human life. And then we will continue to provide our advice to Israel in private.
I understand this is another country's decisions here, but the U.S. gives more than $3 billion a year in aid to Israel. Some of those weapons being used in Gaza are purchased or help to be purchased with U.S. taxpayer funds. So whether it's intended or not, to some of the world, it looks like the U.S. is endorsing all of what Israel is doing here. Are you at all asking the military to be more limited in its tactics or more strategic?
The United States of America, when we transfer weapons to another country, whether it's Israel or anyone else, requires an assurance that those weapons will be used in accordance with the law of armed conflict, and we seek accountability to ensure that that is the case. We will continue to do that. We will also work round the clock to try to make sure that life-saving humanitarian assistance gets to people in need. But fundamentally, what President Biden says, how he has described things from the point of view of civilian protection, access to life-saving goods and medicine for civilians. This is where the United States stands. And we do not stand for the killing of innocent people, whether it be Palestinian, Israeli, or otherwise. And we weep and grieve for every lost life, and will continue to do so.
Is that going to be your message to Saudi Arabia's defense minister when you meet tomorrow? I know a number of Arab partners are concerned about the level of violence in Gaza right now.
We've been talking to our Arab partners, including to Saudi Arabia, about the unfolding crisis in Gaza. We listen to them carefully. We share our perspective. And yes, we will have the opportunity to dive deep, not just on what is happening today, but on what tomorrow could bring. Because what President Biden said in the Rose Garden this past week was that we can't go back to October 6th. That means Hamas can no longer terrorize Israel, but it also means that there needs to be a political horizon for the Palestinian people, 2 states for 2 peoples, the right of Palestinians to live in safety, dignity and equality. And we're going to work towards that. And Arab states, including Saudi Arabia, have a role and a responsibility in that as well.
Before I let you go, do you now believe Iran is deterred?
Well, what I believe is that the United States will follow through on what we say we're going to do. We said that if our troops were attacked, we would respond. We responded. If they're attacked again, we will respond again. And we are vigilant because we are seeing elevated threats against our forces throughout the region and an elevated risk of this conflict spreading to other parts of the region. We are doing everything in our power to deter and prevent that, but I'm not going to predict what the future brings other than to say that if we are attacked, we will respond.
Jake Sullivan, thank you for your